He stood in his $15 million mansion, the crystal champagne glass raised high, catching the imported chandelier light. He was toasting his new bride, the woman who would finally give him the children his first wife supposedly couldn't deliver. His extended family clapped with an eager, unified rhythm. His mother, Helena, beamed with cool satisfaction, the smile never quite reaching her calculating eyes. Everyone in the ballroom agreed he had made the only sensible choice by discarding his barren wife and securing the Thornwell legacy. But 50 miles away, in the sterile intensity of a hospital delivery room, that very woman, the one they had all labeled inadequate and thrown away, was about to prove every single one of them catastrophically wrong. Not once, not twice, but 4 times over. Have you ever been completely thrown away by someone who swore, with tears in their eyes, that they loved you eternally? Have you ever been made to feel like you were fundamentally broken, defective, or simply not enough, only to later discover that you were always monumentally more than enough? What would you do if the person who cruelly abandoned you, who humiliated you, who replaced you for being insufficient, suddenly discovered that you possessed the one thing they risked everything to find? Would you open your arms and welcome them back into the light? Would you slam the door in their face forever, savoring the taste of their desperate regret? Or would you devise a plan so unexpected, so precise, that it would redefine the very nature of revenge and justice? This is a story about a man who carelessly tossed away a flawless diamond because he was convinced, by his own arrogance and impatience, that it was merely worthless glass. This is about a woman who was told she was incomplete, defective, and lacking purpose, only to become exponentially more powerful, more fulfilled, and more blessed than anyone in her old life could have possibly predicted. It is about 4 tiny, profound miracles who would mercilessly expose the greatest, most devastating lie ever spoken within a marriage. And it is about the precise, unforgettable moment when karma didn't just quietly knock on the door, it kicked the solid oak down with a vengeance. But here is what truly distinguishes this narrative from anything you have ever heard before. The ending. It is an ending that will challenge everything you think you understand about the concepts of forgiveness, about the value of second chances, and about what justice truly looks like when it is served cold and complete. You likely believe you know exactly how this dramatic story concludes. Trust me, you absolutely do not. I urge you to stay until the very last word, because the final, intricate twist will leave you questioning every moral compass you hold dear. Welcome back to Mr. Roman's Story Vault. If this is your first time here, you have just discovered a channel where the stories we share don't just exist to entertain. They are here to teach hard lessons, to inspire genuine transformation, and to permanently alter the way you perceive the dynamics of the world and relationships around you. To my returning family, I offer my deepest thanks for your continued support. It truly means everything. Now, before we plunge into this incredible, complex journey, do me one quick, vital favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the notification bell right next to it so you are guaranteed never to miss a moment of the drama. And if you are already feeling the irresistible pull of this saga, go ahead and smash that like button. It helps this story reach more people than you can possibly know. Are you ready for the truth? Let's begin. 6 years before the world Lennox Hargrove built would spectacularly fall apart, she was already building an empire entirely of her own making. At just 25 years old, she commanded the frigid elegance of Manhattan boardrooms with a singular kind of presence, a powerful gravitational force that consistently made senior executives twice her age stop talking and lean forward intently when she spoke. As a rising marketing executive at Crawford & Associates, one of the city's most respected boutique advertising firms, Lennox had earned every square inch of her coveted corner office through the sheer force of pure, undeniable talent and a relentless, almost painful work ethic. Her warm, deep brown skin seemed to radiate an intrinsic confidence even under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights of corporate America. Her natural hair, which she wore in a revolving canvas of striking styles depending on her mood and the demands of the day, became her unmistakable signature. A quiet, beautiful rebellion against the stifling, unspoken rules of conformity prevalent in her industry. When Lennox walked into any room, conversations didn't just pause. They ceased entirely, not because she ever demanded attention, but because she had earned it through respect and demonstrated capability. She had learned early, through necessity and observation, that respect was never a gift handed out freely. It had to be expertly taken. Growing up in the tight-knit but challenging neighborhoods of Baltimore, as the only cherished child of Dorothy Hargrove, a single mother who worked crushing double shifts as a registered nurse, Lennox understood the precise, expensive cost of sacrifice. She watched her mother leave for the hospital before the first hint of dawn and return home well after midnight, the exhaustion etched into every tired line of her face, all done to ensure her daughter had the opportunities Dorothy herself had been cruelly denied. "Baby, listen to me," Dorothy would insist during those rare, quiet moments they managed to share at the kitchen table, her eyes fierce with protective love. "Never, ever let a man's money be the thing that makes you forget your own immense worth. You hear me? You bring intrinsic value to any single room you enter. Don't you dare ever forget that fact." Lennox never did. She navigated her way through college, funding her education with a dizzying combination of academic scholarships, grueling part-time jobs, and relentless, white-knuckled determination. By the time she graduated with honors from Howard University, she had already calmly turned down 3 lucrative job offers to accept the position at Crawford and Associates. Not because it offered the largest starting salary, but because she knew it would teach her the most. For years later, she was the spearhead of complex marketing campaigns for Fortune 500 companies, systematically making a name for herself in a brutally competitive industry that didn't always openly welcome or appreciate accomplished women who looked exactly like her. She had meticulously built her own resounding success. She didn't need validation from any external source to define her worth, which is precisely why Merrick Thornwell, a man accustomed to defining others, couldn't stop thinking about her after their very first, fleeting meeting. The grand charity gala for underprivileged youth was being held at the iconic Plaza Hotel on a crisp, electrically charged October evening. Crawford and Associates had been contracted to flawlessly organize the entire event, and Lennox was running point on every microscopic detail, from the logistics of the silent auction items to the precise timing of the keynote speaker's delivery. That keynote speaker was Merrick Thornwell. At 35, Merrick embodied everything that American capitalism promised and idolized: third-generation dynastic wealth, a staggering real estate portfolio that stretched aggressively across the entire eastern seaboard, sandy brown hair that was always impossibly styled to perfection, and piercing, icy blue eyes that had closed multi-million-dollar deals with a single, unblinking look. He possessed the kind of effortless, practiced smile that made intimidated investors feel, momentarily, like they were the single most important person in the room. He was inherently accustomed to acquiring whatever he desired, precisely when he desired it. His speech that evening was polished, heavily rehearsed, and utterly devoid of genuine emotion. A carefully constructed narrative masterpiece about the importance of giving back, about corporate responsibility, and about securing the future. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. A sea of diamonds and silk. Cameras flashed, blinding the room. He felt the familiar, addictive rush of validation and approval wash over him. As he stepped down from the podium, basking in the glow, a woman in a stunning, emerald green dress approached him, her hand extended professionally. "That was an impressively delivered presentation, Mr. Thornwell," she stated, her voice smooth, low, and impeccably professional. "Though I did notice you utilized the same poverty statistics twice in the dense middle section. You might want to vary your data points next time you speak to a crowd like this to maintain your full credibility." Merrick's perfectly sculpted eyebrows instantly lifted. People in his orbit simply did not critique him, especially not at high-profile events where he was unequivocally the star attraction and chief donor. "I apologize, I didn't catch your name," he said, forcing himself to study her more closely. She was objectively stunning, yes, but there was something else entirely radiating from her. A sharp, undeniable intelligence emanated from her like palpable heat. "That's because I haven't thrown it," Lennox replied, the hint of a genuine smile playing briefly at the corners of her mouth. "Now, if you'll kindly excuse me, I have a very complex auction to coordinate before the last course is served." She turned and walked away decisively, leaving Merrick Thornwell standing completely alone in the middle of a densely crowded, buzzing ballroom. experiencing a sensation he hadn't felt in nearly a decade. Intrigue. Took him 3 long, frustrating weeks to find out exactly who she was. 3 weeks of discreet inquiries, of applying pressure to the event organizers, of finally convincing a slightly terrified associate at Crawford & Associates to hand over a name. Lennox Hargrove. Marketing executive, 25 years old, single and apparently untouchable. He sent flowers to her corporate office the very next day. It was a modest arrangement, deliberately understated, not the overwhelming, extravagant displays he usually commissioned to impress women. The accompanying card read simply, "I varied my data points. Dinner to discuss what else I might be doing fundamentally wrong." Lennox laughed out loud when she read the card, then promptly tossed the piece of paper into the waste bin. The flowers, however, kept coming. Different, increasingly elegant arrangements, different clever messages, all carrying the same underlying, insistent request. "He's certainly persistent, isn't he?" Her assistant commented dryly after the 5th delivery had arrived, displacing a stack of files. "Persistence does not mean I am obligated to respond," Lennox replied, though she was admittedly allowing herself to be somewhat amused by his unwavering effort. After 4 relentless weeks of floral arrangements, Merrick intelligently switched tactics. He made a substantial, highly publicized donation to the youth organization from the gala, a monumental sum, and he explicitly made it in Lennox's name. That finally got her attention. She called him on a Thursday afternoon, her tone cool and measured. "Mr. Thornwell, while I do genuinely appreciate the charity donation, I absolutely do not appreciate being used as a generous tax write-off to satisfy what I perceive to be your overblown ego. It ceases to be a tax write-off in my name if the credit is publicly attributed to yours," he countered smoothly, a genuine smile in his voice. "And my ego would be far better satisfied if you would simply agree to have dinner with me one evening. If you hate every second of it, I promise I will never bother you again. You are bothering me right now. Then what's one more meticulously planned evening?" Despite every cautionary instinct telling her that this man represented complications she emphatically did not need or want in her organized life, Lennox found the single word slipping out. Yes. Their first dinner unfolded at a quiet, unpretentious French restaurant tucked away in the West Village. Merrick had specifically chosen it because it wasn't showy or flashy. No invasive paparazzi, no scene to be made. Just excellent food and stimulating conversation. He learned that night that Lennox was genuinely unimpressed by the magnitude of his wealth. When he subtly mentioned his numerous properties, she changed the subject instantly. When he power-named powerful associates, she looked utterly bored. But when he asked deeply about her mother, about her formative years growing up in Baltimore, about the precise moment she knew she wanted to work in marketing, her entire face transformed. She became animated, deeply passionate, and fully, vividly alive. "You actually listen when people speak," she observed thoughtfully halfway through the meal, her gaze steady and analytical. "That is profoundly rare for someone in your particular position." "And what position would that be exactly?" "Rich, powerful, accustomed to being the single most important person in every single room all the time." Merrick let out a genuine, surprising laugh. "You truly don't pull any punches, do you?" "Life's too short for manufactured games," Lennox stated simply. "My mother taught me that brutal honesty is the quickest way to save time." "Your mother sounds like an incredibly wise woman." "She is the wisest person I have ever known." By the end of the evening, Merrick knew, with a sudden, sinking certainty, that he was in serious trouble. This woman was unlike anyone he had ever successfully dated or pursued. She didn't need his assistance. She didn't want anything tangible from him. She simply demanded that he be authentic. Their intense courtship unfolded over the next 18 months, playing out like a complex, deeply personal story neither of them had ever expected to write. For their 3rd date, Merrick, unable to resist a grand gesture, flew her to Paris. He had fully expected her to be completely blown away by the private jet, the opulent 5-star hotel suite, and the exclusive, unobtainable restaurant reservations. Instead, what genuinely captivated Lennox was the small, intentional detail that he remembered she preferred a specific herbal tea over coffee, even after all this time. It was the careful, patient way he listened to her talk about a difficult client conflict without once offering unsolicited, mansplaining advice. And most crucially, it was the way he treated the flight attendants, the discreet hotel staff, and every single waiter with a foundation of genuine human respect, rather than the dismissive entitlement he often saw from his peers. On their last magical night in the city, they strolled hand in hand along the Seine, the scattered lights from the ancient bridges dancing like scattered diamonds on the dark, rushing water. "You are very different from what I expected," Lennox admitted finally, her hand fitting perfectly into his. Merrick stopped walking abruptly and turned to face her fully. "I could say the same exact thing about you, Lennox. You challenge me constantly. You make me want to be demonstrably better than I am right now." "You're already better than you currently think," she whispered softly. "You just urgently needed someone who could truly see it." He kissed her right there on the deserted riverbank, beneath the shadow of a stone bridge, and for the very first time in his carefully controlled, meticulously calculated life, Merrick Thornwell felt like he was precisely where he belonged. Back in New York, their relationship deepened significantly. Merrick eventually met Dorothy, who sized him up instantly with the practiced, protective eye of a mother who had guarded her daughter from too many disappointments to count. "You hurt my baby, and every single dollar you possess won't be enough to protect you from me," Dorothy stated plainly over a simple Sunday dinner. "Are we crystal clear on that point, sir?" "Crystal clear, ma'am," Merrick replied instantly, and for the first time in his life he meant it absolutely. Dorothy watched how he looked at her daughter, like Lennox was the complete, final answer to a profound question he'd been asking his entire life, and decided, cautiously, to give him the chance he craved. Lennox, in turn, met the entire formidable Thornwell family at a formal, heavily scripted dinner in Connecticut. Merrick's mother, Helena Thornwell, was every inch the intimidating society matriarch. Impeccably dressed, meticulously mannered, and clearly, profoundly skeptical of her son's choice of partner. "Marketing," Helena repeated slowly when Lennox smoothly explained her thriving career. "How exceedingly contemporary." "I prefer to think of it as absolutely essential," Lennox replied, her tone perfectly even. After all, even the oldest, most established families occasionally need to stay relevant in these rapidly changing times. Helena's eyes narrowed slightly, processing the quick retort. Then she smiled, a brittle, practiced movement. "Indeed. You are quite articulate, my dear." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't outright hostile either. Lennox decided she would take the small victory. Merrick proposed on a breathtaking rooftop terrace in Manhattan. The entire sprawling city lights spread out below them like an endless carpet of scattered diamonds. "I don't have a speech prepared," he confessed, his voice thick with uncharacteristic nervousness as he held the velvet ring box. "Every version I rehearsed sounded too forced, too formalized, too unlike us. So I will just say this simple truth. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever met, Lennox. You make me fundamentally better. You make me real. Marry me. Build a life, a family, a legacy with me." She said yes instantly, without the slightest hesitation. Their wedding, which took place 18 months after they first met, was a perfect, seamless blend of both their disparate worlds. Dorothy cried openly throughout the entire meaningful ceremony. Even Helena, watching her son gaze at his bride like Lennox had personally hung every star in the sky, had to grudgingly admit they made a profoundly striking couple. The reception brought together Lennox's colleagues from the aggressive marketing world, her loyal childhood friends from Baltimore, Merrick's powerful business associates, and his mother's highly exclusive Connecticut social circle. It was a fusion that logically shouldn't have worked, yet miraculously it did. "To my wife," Merrick toasted during the dinner, his eyes never once leaving Lennox's radiant face, "who successfully taught me that the absolute best things in this life are the ones you have to truly earn, not simply inherit." The first 3 years of their marriage were everything Lennox had quietly dreamed of and far more. She successfully launched her own high-end consulting firm with Merrick's full, professional support. Not his money, which she politely refused, but his advice, his powerful connections, and his unwavering, absolute belief that she was destined to succeed. And she did. Merrick brought her completely into his world, consulting her on major business decisions, valuing her sharp perspective, and treating her as a true, indispensable partner in every conceivable sense. Their spectacular home in Connecticut quickly became their sanctuary. On languid Sunday mornings, they would stay tangled in bed until noon, talking about everything important and nothing significant at all. Merrick would trace warm, absent patterns on her skin and speak excitedly about the large, boisterous family he desperately wanted to build with her. "Our kids are going to be incredible," he would murmur, his hand resting securely on her flat stomach. "They'll have your razor-sharp brilliance and your unparalleled beauty, and definitely your stubbornness. Perfect balance," she would tease, running her fingers through his thick hair. "Our children will be extraordinary," he'd promise, laughing. At night, he held her exceptionally close, whispering tender promises into her hair. Promises of a forever life, promises of a love that would easily weather any coming storm, promises of a family that would be built firmly upon the unbreakable foundation they were creating together. Lennox believed every single word. She believed they were building something shatterproof, something profoundly real, something that would undoubtedly last. She had absolutely no way of knowing that the microscopic cracks were already forming deep beneath the beautiful surface, that the sacred promises whispered so intimately in the dark would soon turn to cold, searing accusations in the light. She couldn't know that the man who once insisted she made him better would soon, calculatingly, decide she simply wasn't enough. But for now, in those glorious, golden years, Lennox Hargrove Thornwell was happier than she had ever been in her life. She was loved unconditionally. She was valued intrinsically. She was home. The fall, when it inevitably arrived, would be that much more catastrophic and devastating. The first visible crack appeared precisely on their 4th wedding anniversary. Lennox and Merrick had planned a highly intimate dinner at their Connecticut estate, just the two of them. Champagne on the terrace, the kind of quiet, deep celebration that long-married couples enjoy when they are still genuinely, profoundly happy. Helena Thornwell, however, had entirely different, more pressing plans. Merrick's mother arrived unannounced at 3 o'clock that afternoon, letting herself in with the spare key she had coldly insisted on retaining for emergencies. She swept through the grand house in a suffocating cloud of Chanel No. 5 perfume and barely veiled, icy expectations. For years, Helena announced, settling herself deliberately in the pristine living room as though she were the unquestioned owner. For full years of marriage and still absolutely no grandchildren. The Thornwell name must continue, Merrick. You know time is rapidly passing. Her eyes settled on Lennox's flat stomach with the cold, surgical precision of a laser beam. Lennox kept her professionally trained smile perfectly in place. "We're enjoying being just the two of us for now, Helena. We want to savor this phase. Enjoyment is perfectly well and good, dear, but legacy is what truly matters in this family. Merrick is an only child. The responsibility falls solely to him." She paused dramatically, taking a delicate, judgmental sip of the tea she had asked Lennox to prepare. "I do sincerely hope there isn't a problem on your end." The word problem hung motionless in the air like a cold, heavy accusation. "No problem," Merrick said quickly. Too quickly. "We're just not in any kind of rush, Mother." But after Helena finally departed, the toxic seed of doubt had been planted, deep and firm. What neither of them ever mentioned to Merrick's mother, what they barely acknowledged to each other, was that they had been desperately trying to conceive for well over a year. Lennox had stopped taking birth control 14 months earlier. They had both excitedly agreed it was the perfect time. They were financially unshakable, emotionally ready, and successfully building the extraordinary life they wanted. She had fully expected to be pregnant within a few short months. The first few negative tests hadn't worried her at all. These things frequently took time, she reasoned rationally. Stress from work could affect cycles. Timing wasn't always perfect or immediate. But month after relentless month, the expensive digital tests showed the exact same, devastating single line. By month 8, Lennox scheduled a discreet appointment with her trusted gynecologist. The doctor ran extensive blood work, checked hormone levels, and performed a comprehensive ultrasound. "Everything looks perfectly normal," the doctor assured her kindly. Sometimes it simply takes longer for some couples to conceive. Try your absolute best to relax. Stress can actually inhibit conception significantly. Merrick went to see a top specialist at Lennox's gentle, firm insistence. He returned with the identical news. Completely healthy, he reported, though she noticed he couldn't quite meet her eyes when he spoke. The doctor said we're both completely fine. It'll happen when it finally happens. But as the difficult months continued to relentlessly pass with no sign of pregnancy, something profound began to shift and decay in their otherwise flawless home. The shift was almost imperceptible at first, so subtle that Lennox almost convinced herself that she was simply overreacting, projecting her own desperation onto him. Merrick's touches, which had always been frequent, easy, and deeply affectionate, became notably less so. He used to effortlessly pull her close while they watched television, his fingers tracing absent, calming patterns on her arm. Now he sat tensely on the opposite end of the vast couch, his laptop open, his professional attention clearly elsewhere. He used to kiss her goodbye every single morning, a sacred ritual that had grounded them both firmly in their reality. Now he left for work while she was still showering, calling out a distracted, impersonal farewell from the doorway. Their physical intimacy, which had once been passionate, frequent, and deeply connecting, became scheduled and painfully clinical. It occurred precisely during her fertile window, meticulously checked and calculated, because it had to, not because they desperately wanted to connect emotionally or physically. Maybe we're trying too hard, Lennox suggested one night after another mechanical, sterile encounter had concluded. Maybe we should just let it happen naturally the way we used to. We've been letting it happen naturally for over a year, Merrick replied flatly, his voice devoid of warmth. Clearly, that strategy is not working in our favor. He immediately rolled away from her, and Lennox stared forlornly at his broad back in the oppressive darkness, feeling a profound, cold emptiness that had nothing whatsoever to do with the room temperature. By their 5th year of marriage, Merrick was working later and later hours. Big project, he would vaguely explain via text message. Don't wait up for me. Lennox would eat dinner completely alone at the large, formal table they used to joyfully share. Her perfectly prepared food grew cold as she obsessively refreshed her phone, hoping for updates that rarely, if ever, came. When he finally did come home, he smelled distinctly of expensive restaurants, strong scotch and unfamiliar, high-end cologne. His eyes, which used to instantly warm when they saw her, remained distant, aloof, and cool. "How was your day?" she would ask weakly, desperately trying to maintain some basic semblance of normalcy. "Fine," he would answer curtly, already heading quickly upstairs. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed now." The man she had married, the one who used to happily stay up talking with her until 3 in the morning, who valued her complex opinions, who openly treated her like an equal partner, was steadily disappearing, day by day. In his place was a cold, distant stranger who looked at her either like she was a frustrating, impossible puzzle he simply couldn't solve, or worse, like she was a profound disappointment he was rapidly growing tired of managing. What Lennox didn't know yet was that Merrick had already found someone new, who made him feel immediately like the man he desperately wanted to be perceived as. Her name was Tinsley Vaughn. At 26, Tinsley had carefully constructed a modest career as a specialist interior designer for high-value commercial properties. She wasn't considered the most talented or innovative designer in all of New York, but she was certainly the most strategic and ambitious. Thornwell Industries hired her small firm to renovate the expansive lobby and common areas of a major downtown office building. The assigned project manager immediately put her in direct contact with Merrick for all design approvals and aesthetic sign-offs. Tinsley, observant and sharp, recognized the golden opportunity the very moment she shook his hand. Wealthy, handsome, and wearing his subtle, deep distress like a second skin, she had done her homework and researched him thoroughly before their initial consultation. Married, no children. Wife was some kind of highly successful business consultant. No social media presence as a high-profile couple. Interesting. Mr. Thornwell, she purred at their initial meeting, her perfectly manicured hand lingering just a moment too long in his. I have to say, I'm genuinely so excited about this project. Your vision for this space is truly compelling. Thank you, Merrick replied, professional but politely distant. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with, Ms. Vaughn. Over the next few calculating weeks, Tinsley made sure that every critical design presentation required an in-person mandatory meeting with Merrick. She scheduled them purposefully for late afternoon, precisely when she knew he would be tired, emotionally vulnerable, and professionally stressed. She wore clothing that was professional enough to be appropriate for the office, but exquisitely fitted enough to ensure she was visually noticed. She asked penetrating, focused questions about his business, his properties, his long-term plans for expansion. She listened to every word he spoke as if it were the most profound, original thought ever conceived, and slowly, carefully, she began to introduce more personal, intimate topics into their conversations. You seem incredibly tense today, she observed during their fourth clandestine meeting, her voice soft with manufactured, yet convincing concern. Is everything all right at home? Merrick should have shut down the question immediately. He should have invoked the strict, unspoken rule of professional distance that dictated his world. He should have thought of Lennox, her warmth, the sacredness of the vows he had taken on that crisp autumn day, and the complicated, beautiful life they had painstakingly constructed. Instead, a strange, dark current pulled the words from him, a calculated vulnerability he didn't realize he possessed. He heard himself saying, "Just the usual pressures. Nothing I can't handle." "I'm sure you handle everything beautifully," Tinsley said, her tone smooth as glass, her eyes holding his just a beat too long. A fraction of time that felt like a lifetime of unspoken permission. "But everyone needs someone to talk to sometimes. I'm a good listener if you ever need one." That was the precise, defining moment he should have walked away, stood up, and placed an insurmountable barrier between them. He didn't. He smiled instead, accepting the offering. The affair began exactly 6 weeks after they met. It started subtly, professionally, with lunches that habitually ran long, transitioning from market forecasts to shared aspirations, from Q3 goals to unspoken loneliness. Business meetings somehow transitioned into intensely personal conversations. Tinsley, an expert conversationalist, began confiding carefully edited stories about her own life, narratives expertly designed to make her seem vulnerable, relatable, and, most potently, available. "I've always wanted a family," she mentioned casually over expensive sushi one Tuesday, tilting her head just so. "But it's hard to find a man who truly values that anymore. Everyone's so focused on careers and freedom." Merrick, consuming the raw fish he barely tasted, thought of Lennox, of the endless parade of negative pregnancy tests discarded quietly in their master bathroom bin, of his mother's sharp, pointed questions about grandchildren, and of the hollow, echoing emptiness he felt every time he walked into his sprawling Connecticut house. "Family is important," he agreed, his voice heavier than he intended, thick with a meaning Tinsley was expertly designed to catch. She reached across the imported wood table, her fingers cool and confident, and placed her hand over his. The physical contact was a jolt, a dangerous validation. "You would make an incredible father," she said softly, her blue eyes wide and sincere. "I can tell." He should have recoiled. He should have pulled his hand away as if burned, slammed the door shut on the project meetings, and ended whatever perilous structure was rapidly building between them. Instead, he allowed her hand to stay, absorbing the illicit comfort. 2 weeks later, they met at an anonymous, upscale hotel in Midtown. Merrick told himself it was just once. Just a moment of weakness, a necessary, brutal release from the suffocating pressure that had been building at home. But once became twice, twice became a pattern defined by secrecy and convenience. The pattern swiftly hardened into a routine. Tinsley knew exactly what to say, exactly how to make him feel. Strong, desired, capable. She never mentioned the pregnancy struggles or the disappointment. She never asked difficult, confronting questions. She never critically made him feel inadequate. "A man like you deserves to have everything he wants," she whispered one evening in a hotel room that was quickly becoming far too familiar, smelling faintly of clean linen and expensive cologne. A man like you deserves children, a legacy. I could give you that. I could give you everything. And Merrick, the man who had once promised Lennox forever under the glow of the Eiffel Tower, let himself believe the lie she offered. Back in Connecticut, Lennox was beginning to notice the small, nagging details that refused to add up. She found a crumpled receipt deep in the interior pocket of his charcoal jacket. Not for a client dinner, but for a delicate, expensive diamond pendant from a jeweler she didn't recognize, and which she had certainly never received. When she asked about it casually, folding laundry, Merrick claimed it was a gift for a major client. "Which client?" she asked, her voice light, but her chest tightening. "The interior designer on the downtown project," he replied, not meeting her eyes as he scrolled through his phone. Professional courtesy. Lennox filed the information away, trying to smother the cold, creeping discomfort settling deep in her chest. Then came the shirts. His custom-made shirts started coming back from the cleaners with faint traces of perfume that wasn't hers. Not her signature sandalwood, but something lighter, younger, aggressively floral. "Did they switch detergents at the dry cleaners?" she asked, holding up a freshly pressed sleeve to her nose, inhaling the scent of spring flowers in late autumn. "Maybe," Merrick muttered, refusing to look up from his phone, a device that had become his impenetrable shield. "I don't pay attention to that stuff." His phone, which used to sit casually on kitchen counters and coffee tables, was now always in his pocket, always face down, always protected with a new, cryptic password he had changed without explanation. When it buzzed during dinner, one of the rare evenings he was actually home, he would snatch it up immediately, his face tightening with a muscle spasm that looked agonizingly like guilt. "Work?" Lennox would ask, pouring more wine into her glass. "Always," he would reply, typing out brief, urgent responses, angling the screen aggressively away from her view. The evidence was mounting daily, piece by undeniable piece. The distance between them was growing into an abyss. The man she loved was silently slipping away, dissolving into secrets, and she felt utterly powerless to stop his departure. But Lennox Harrove had been raised by Dorothy, a woman who fought tooth and nail for what mattered. Dorothy hadn't given up when life got hard, and Lennox would not surrender her marriage easily. Her partnership was worth fighting for. At least, that's what she told herself as she lay awake at 3 a.m., listening to Merrick's steady, alien breathing beside her, wondering when the last time was that he had actually looked at her with genuine love instead of polite obligation. She still believed they could fix this cavernous rift. She still believed that whatever was happening was temporary, a midlife crisis or professional stress. She still believed that the man who had once walked with her along the Seine and promised to be better for her forever was still buried in there somewhere. She was devastatingly wrong, but she wouldn't discover just how wrong until it was far, far too late. Family, if the story is hitting you right where it hurts, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you started noticing these signs? Would you confront your partner immediately, demanding answers? Would you investigate further, hiring someone or digging into their emails? Would you try to pretend you didn't see what was right in front of you, hoping it would pass? And if you believe Lennox deserves so much better than what she's getting, hit that like button. Let me know you're on her side, because what happens next is going to absolutely break your heart before it has a chance to heal it. Let me tell you what happened when everything finally, irrevocably fell apart. Lennox spent 3 days planning the perfect, restorative evening. She cleared her typically suffocating schedule, leaving the office early on a Friday afternoon to shop for ingredients at the upscale farmers market in Greenwich. She bought fresh, aromatic herbs, the finest cut of beef she could find, and the precious, dusty bottle of Bordeaux they had shared on their honeymoon, the one they had promised to save for a truly special occasion. This felt special enough. This felt like their marriage, maybe even her sanity, depended on it. At home, she transformed their sterile dining room into something lifted straight from a magazine spread. Tapered candles flickered on every available surface, casting a warm, deceptive light across the weighty mahogany table. She arranged a profusion of white roses, Merrick's favorite, in the heavy crystal vases. The good wedding china came out of storage along with the heirloom silver they had received as gifts but rarely used, deeming it too formal for their busy lives. In the kitchen, she prepared his favorite meal with the exacting precision of a Michelin-starred chef. Filet mignon, rubbed with rosemary and garlic, roasted vegetables picked from their own small garden plot, and the temperamental chocolate soufflé that had taken her 3 agonizing attempts to master when they were nervous, newly married. She wore the red dress, the silk sheath Merrick had bought her for their 2nd anniversary. The one he always said made her look like she had stepped directly out of a dream. By 7 p.m., everything was perfect, glowing, ready. By 8 p.m., the candles had burned down an inch, the rose scent now heavy in the air. By 9 p.m., the food was cooling, the perfect crust on the soufflé sinking into a memory. At 10:15 p.m., Merrick finally walked through the front door. He stopped short in the foyer when he saw the dining room, taking in the rows of candlelight, the excessive roses, the meticulously set table. His expression wasn't pleasure or appreciation. It was something closer to profound irritation, a visible annoyance at having his carefully managed schedule disrupted. "What's all this?" he asked, loosening his expensive silk tie, the sound gratingly loud in the quiet house. "Dinner," Lennox said, forcing a brittle, painful brightness into her voice. "I wanted us to have a nice evening together. Just the 2 of us." Merrick glanced pointedly at his watch. "I already ate. Client dinner ran late." The words hit her like a blast of cold water. No apology, no acknowledgement of the hours of painstaking effort, no explanation for why he hadn't managed a single courtesy call or text. "I can reheat everything," she offered quickly, desperately. "The filet will just take a few minutes to bring back up to temperature." "I'm not hungry, Lennox." She watched him move through the room she had spent half her week perfecting, moving with a detached efficiency, blowing out candles one by one with mechanical puffs, as though her enormous effort was nothing more than a potential fire hazard. "Merrick, please sit with me for a few minutes. We never talk anymore. We just exist." He paused, his hand hovering over the light switch, bathed in the sudden, lonely darkness left by the extinguished flame. "Talk about what?" he asked, his voice flat. "About us? About what's happening between us." Her voice was steady, despite the way her hands trembled violently as she smoothed the fabric of the red dress. "I feel like you're slipping away from me." For a fleeting, horrible moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or a flash of recognition of the woman he had once adored standing before him, in a dress he had chosen, in a room she had transformed with overwhelming love. But the moment passed, shuddering closed. When he turned to face her fully, his eyes were cold and vacant, utterly devoid of warmth. "Maybe I wouldn't be slipping away if you could give me what I need." The words landed like physical blows, sucking the air from the room and leaving her reeling. "What are you saying?" Lennox whispered, barely audible over the roaring in her ears. "I'm saying I've wasted years waiting for children that you can't seem to provide. My family needs an heir, Lennox. You knew that when you married me. The doctor said we both have no medical issues, Merrick. We are both healthy." "Then maybe the problem isn't medical," he interrupted, his voice cutting through her desperate defense like a polished blade. "Maybe we just weren't meant to be parents, or together." The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Lennox felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She felt the foundation of everything she believed crack open into a bottomless chasm. "You're blaming me," she said, her voice rising to a choked whisper. "For both of us struggling with this, you're blaming only me. I'm stating facts, Lennox. 5 years. 5 years of trying and nothing. Maybe it's time we both accepted reality." She stared at the man she had loved completely, the man she had built a future with, and realized with sickening clarity that she didn't recognize him at all. "So what are you saying? You want to give up? Just like that?" "I'm saying maybe this was a mistake from the beginning." The red dress suddenly felt like a garish costume she had no business wearing. The roses looked absurdly dramatic. The cold, congealing food on the perfect china seemed like definitive evidence of her own profound foolishness. "Get out," she said quietly. What? Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. Her voice was stronger now, steadier, fueled by a searing, protective rage. I spent 3 days planning this evening because I thought we had something worth fighting for. Clearly, I was wrong. Merrick stood there for a long moment longer, hesitating. As though he wanted to say something else, as though some distant, better part of him remembered who they used to be when they were happy. But whatever decent impulse that was, he suppressed it ruthlessly. He left the room without another word, and Lennox heard his heavy, retreating footsteps on the stairs, heard the solid thud of the bedroom door closing behind him. She stood alone among the rapidly dying candles and the wilting roses, surrounded by the physical wreckage of her last, failed attempt to save her marriage. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. Lennox found them waiting for her on the pristine kitchen counter when she came home from work, accompanied by a terse note in Merrick's unmistakable, sloping handwriting. * My attorney will be in touch. No conversation, no warning, no acknowledgement of the 7 years they had shared or the sacred vows they had taken. She called his office immediately. His assistant, an unervingly polite woman, informed her that Mr. Thornwell was unavailable and would remain so for the foreseeable future. All communication should go through his legal representation. The lawyers he had hired were the most expensive, most ruthless firm in all of New York, the kind of firm that specialized in making complex problems disappear quickly and quietly, regardless of the collateral emotional damage. When Lennox's own attorney, a family friend who typically handled her business contracts, reviewed the petition, his face was grim. He's not asking for anything technically unreasonable, her lawyer admitted, tapping his pen on the thick documents. The prenup you signed protects most of his family assets. But Lennox, he's clearly in an extreme hurry. He wants this finalized as soon as humanly possible. Why the rush? Her attorney hesitated, looking away briefly. Usually, when someone wants to expedite a divorce this aggressively, it's because they have a compelling reason to be legally free. A commitment, perhaps. The implication hung heavily between them, toxic and undeniable. There's someone else, Lennox said, the statement flat, not a question. I can't prove that legally, of course. But if I were you, I'd prepare myself for that possibility. It seems likely. That evening, Lennox called Merrick's private cell line, the number he had used since college. For once, miraculously, he answered. I got the papers, she said without any preamble. Good. I want this done quickly and quietly. I will be fair regarding the division of assets, but I've already moved on. Moved on. The foreign words felt like grit in her mouth. To what exactly? To someone who can give me what I need. Silence stretched across the line, thick and cold. Merrick, who is she? That's not your concern anymore. The line went dead, leaving her holding a phone that buzzed mournfully with the disconnection. 2 days later, Lennox discovered the truth in the cruelest, most public way possible. She was standing in line at a bustling coffee shop near her office when she overheard 2 immaculately dressed women discussing the latest society pages. Did you see the article about Merrick Thornwell? One asked, stirring her latte. He's already engaged to some interior designer, Tinsley V. That was fast, the other replied, sounding thrilled by the drama. Didn't his divorce just finalize last week? Apparently, but the new fiancée is gorgeous, much younger than the ex-wife. Lennox excused herself from the line, abandoning her coffee order, and walked directly to the nearest newsstand, her blood pounding in her ears. She bought every society magazine they carried, her hands shaking as she flipped through the glossy pages. There, on page 3 of Manhattan Elite, was a full-color, professionally staged photograph that stopped her heart dead in her chest. Merrick and a stunning, platinum-blonde woman were sitting at Le Bernardin, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The woman's left hand was prominently positioned on the table, showcasing a mammoth, multi-carat diamond ring that was easily twice the size of the elegant ring Lennox had worn for 5 years. The headline read, Real estate mogul Merrick Thornwell engaged to interior designer after quiet divorce. The article was brief but brutal in its efficiency. *Thornwell Industries CEO Merrick Thornwell, 42, announced his engagement to interior designer Tinsley Vaughn, 26, at an intimate dinner last evening. The couple began dating following Thornwell's recent divorce from marketing consultant Lennox Harrove. "We're thrilled to start our family together," Vaughn commented for the piece. Sources close to the family suggest a lavish summer wedding is already planned. Start their family. The words were a deliberate, calculated knife twist, designed to communicate exactly why the previous marriage had been disposed of. Lennox sank onto a cold granite bench outside the newsstand, staring unblinking at the photograph. This woman, this Tinsley, was beautiful in the exhausting, obvious way that required endless money, time, and youth to maintain. Platinum blonde hair, perfect, practiced teeth, the kind of sleek figure that looked flawless in designer clothes. She was everything Lennox wasn't, and apparently everything Merrick wanted. The worst part wasn't the engagement itself. It wasn't even the shocking speed with which it had happened. The worst, gut-wrenching realization was knowing that while she had been agonizingly planning romantic reconciliation dinners and fighting desperately for their marriage, Merrick had already been constructing an entire future with someone else. Dorothy arrived at Lennox's apartment within 3 hours of receiving her daughter's broken phone call. Her mother took one look at her daughter's white, ravaged face and immediately wrapped her in the kind of fierce, protective, unconditionally loving embrace that only mothers can provide. "That man is a fool," Dorothy said fiercely, holding Lennox tighter as she finally let herself collapse and cry, great shuddering sobs that shook her entire body. "He threw away the best thing that ever happened to him, baby girl. And one day he's going to realize it when he's old and lonely. Why wasn't I enough, Mama?" Lennox sobbed into her mother's silk blouse. "I gave him everything. I loved him completely. Why wasn't that enough for him?" Dorothy pulled back just enough to take her daughter's tear-streaked face in her hands, forcing eye contact. "Listen to me, baby girl. You are always enough. You hear me? Always. Never let his failures become your definition of self-worth. That man's inability to see your value says absolutely nothing about you and everything about his broken character. And the children will come when they're meant to come. And when they do, they'll be blessed to have a mother who knows her own worth. A mother who doesn't settle for men who make her feel small." Dorothy stayed for 2 weeks, helping Lennox navigate the initial terror of the divorce proceedings and the unexpected media attention that followed. Merrick Thornwell was a prominent figure in New York real estate, and his messy personal life quickly became cheap entertainment for people with too much money and too little purpose. The divorce settlement negotiations revealed one final, damning truth about the man Lennox had married. Despite hiring the most aggressive attorneys in the city, Merrick's team had little legal ground to stand on. The prenuptial agreement protected his family money and inherited assets, but everything they had built together during the 7 years of their marriage, the Connecticut estate, the portfolios, the business interests Merrick developed, was considered community property and fair game. Lennox's attorney urged her constantly to fight for half of it. "You earned this, Lennox," he insisted, walking her through the financial spreadsheets. "You were a full partner in this marriage. You supported his career, entertained his clients, gave him 5 years of your life. Take what you are legally entitled to." But Lennox refused, shaking her head firmly. "I don't want his money," she said, her conviction unwavering. "I want what I contributed, what I earned myself, nothing more. I will not take a single dime of his inheritance." In the end, she walked away with her successful consulting business, her personal savings, and the few pieces of jewelry that had been genuine gifts rather than investments. She consciously left behind the massive Connecticut estate and the entire rarefied lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. "Why?" her attorney asked one afternoon, genuinely puzzled by her decision. "Why leave so much money on the table?" "Because I didn't marry him for his money," Lennox replied simply, folding the final papers. "And I won't let him think I'm leaving him for it either. It was a matter of dignity, and dignity, she had learned from her mother, was something no amount of money could ever buy or replace." Merrick and Tinsley's wedding took place exactly 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It was everything Lennox's quiet, intimate wedding hadn't been. Ostentatious? obscenely expensive, and meticulously designed to make a grand social statement rather than celebrate authentic love. 500 guests filled the gilded ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. There was prominent coverage in 3 different society magazines. Helena Thornwell was in her element as the triumphant mother of the groom, finally getting the spectacle and lineage she had always demanded. The quotes from the wedding coverage eventually found their way to Lennox through well-meaning but tone-deaf friends who thought she should know what was being said. Finally, Helena had told a society reporter, beaming, "My son can have the children he's always wanted. We can't wait to start our family." Tinsley had gushed to the photographer, draped in lace and diamonds. "Merrick is going to be such a wonderful father. This is what true happiness looks like." "It's a new beginning," Merrick himself had said, his arm wrapped possessively around his new bride's minuscule waist, both of them radiating calculated joy for the camera. Lennox read the articles once, absorbing the calculated cruelty, and then shredded them. She was done being a humiliating footnote in Merrick Thornwell's self-serving narrative. It was time, finally, to write her own story. For weeks after signing the final divorce papers, Lennox Hargrove collapsed in her office. She had thrown herself into her work with the desperate intensity of a woman who needed to prove, above all else, that she could build something beautiful and enduring from the charred ashes of her old life. 18-hour days became the norm. Weekend client calls became routine. Sleep became an optional luxury. Her consulting business was thriving beyond expectation. 3 new major clients, a waiting list of potential projects, and industry recognition that had nothing whatsoever to do with the detested Thornwell name. She was building an empire of her own making, one carefully secured contract at a time. But success came at an unavoidable cost. On a humid Tuesday afternoon in September, while presenting a complex marketing strategy to a tech startup's board of directors, the conference room suddenly tilted violently sideways. "Ms. Hargrove," one of the young executives began, reaching toward her in concern. "Are you all right?" Lennox gripped the edge of the smooth, glass table, trying desperately to steady herself as the room continued its dizzying spin. "I'm fine. Just need a moment." The words died in her throat as a dense, velvety darkness swallowed her whole. She woke up on a narrow stretcher in the back of an ambulance, the harsh glare of the city blurring past the windows, an EMT efficiently checking her pulse. "What happened?" she asked weakly, her voice thick and unfamiliar. "You fainted," the paramedic explained calmly. "Hit the floor pretty hard. We're taking you to Mount Sinai for a thorough evaluation." At the hospital, nurses moved around her bed with practiced, efficient motions, taking blood pressure readings, checking her temperature, asking clinical questions she answered through a haze of confusion and exhaustion. When was her last meal? She couldn't remember. When was her last full night's sleep? Weeks ago, maybe months. Any recent stress? The question was almost hysterically funny. Dr. Patricia Chun entered the room carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of calm, experienced expression that suggested she had seen every bizarre scenario and was rarely surprised by anything. "Miss Hargrove, I'm going to order some blood work and run a few tests," Dr. Chun said, pulling up a small stool. "Fainting can be caused by many things: severe dehydration, exhaustion, blood sugar issues. We'll figure out what's going on." 3 hours later, Dr. Chun returned with results that would change absolutely everything. "When was your last menstrual cycle?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Lennox's bed, her voice measured. Lennox thought back through the blur of the past few months. Between the soul-destroying divorce proceedings, the stress of the public scandal, and the demands of aggressively rebuilding her entire business, she had stopped paying any meaningful attention to her body's rhythms. "I don't know," she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. "Maybe 2 months ago? I assumed it was stress. My whole life has been completely upended lately." Dr. Chun nodded slowly, professionally. "Stress can definitely affect cycles. But Miss Hargrove, the blood test is definitive. You're pregnant." The words didn't compute at first. They hovered in the air, nonsensical. Lennox stared blankly at the doctor's face, waiting for clarification or, better yet, a correction. That's impossible, she finally managed to say, pushing herself up weakly on the pillows. I was married for 5 years. We tried constantly, meticulously. Every specialist we saw said we were both completely healthy, yet nothing ever happened. I can't be pregnant now. The HCG level in your blood is definitive, Dr. Chan said gently but firmly. But there's more. I want to do an ultrasound right now just to get a clearer picture of what's happening, and where. 20 minutes later, Lennox lay on an examination table with cool, sterile gel spread across her stomach. Dr. Chen's movements were fluid, precise. The easy choreography of someone who performed this intimate ritual dozens of times a week. The cool gel was spread over Lennox's abdomen, and the ultrasound wand began its slow survey. The monitor screen filled instantly with the familiar, shifting landscape of static and shadows. A grainy, abstract world of black and white that conveyed absolutely nothing to Lennox's layperson's gaze. Dr. Chun grew quiet. Her practiced hand, which had been moving with casual ease, now slowed, the pressure of the wand becoming concentrated and meticulous. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced Lennox's earlier numbness. Is everything okay? Lennox asked, the question catching in her throat. A thread of real fear woven into the silk of her voice. Dr. Chun didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was locked onto the screen, her brow slightly furrowed in deep concentration. She zoomed in, pressed a button, and measurements flashed digitally across the bottom of the frame. Everything is... Dr. Chun paused, finally meeting Lennox's anxious eyes before returning to the image. Miss Hargrove, you're not just pregnant. You are carrying quadruplets. The world didn't just tilt. The entire hospital room seemed to spin on its axis. Yet Lennox remained rooted to the examination table, immobilized by shock. She was certain the doctor had misspoken. For babies, she mouthed, the word a soundless breath. For healthy babies, Dr. Chun confirmed, her tone softening slightly. Based on what I can see, you are approximately 12 weeks along. 12 weeks. Lennox's mind, usually so sharp and mathematical, scrambled to calculate the timing. 12 weeks ago. That was precisely when everything had been normal. She had still been Merrick's wife, still sharing their king-sized bed, still agonizing over the empty future they desperately tried to fill. 12 weeks ago, she had been conceiving the very children he had cruelly asserted she was incapable of bearing, all while he finalized his exit strategy, planning to trade her in for a younger model who allegedly possessed the perfect fertility she lacked. The cosmic joke of it was immediate and staggering. I don't understand, Lennox whispered, her voice barely registering above a shaky breath. We tried for years. Every test was normal. Every doctor assured us we were fine. Yet nothing happened. How is this physically possible now? Dr. Chun slid her stool closer to the examination table, her expression shifting from medical professional to compassionate guide. Sometimes the body has a complex memory and intelligence all its own. She began, her tone gentle but serious. Chronic, profound stress, be it emotional, physical, or psychological, can act as a complete inhibitor to conception. The sustained flood of cortisol and other stress hormones interferes directly with the delicate hormonal balance required for ovulation, successful implantation, and every stage of the reproductive process. She gestured vaguely. Essentially, your body was under siege, perpetually fighting an invisible threat. It wasn't safe to conceive. But when the stress lifted, when your system finally released that chronic tension, everything aligned perfectly. It's certainly rare to conceive multiples this way, but it is far from unheard of. We frequently see women conceive immediately following major life upheavals, leaving highly stressful jobs, recovering from trauma, or, most commonly, ending toxic or anxiety-inducing relationships. Lennox's hand moved without conscious thought, pressing flat against the smooth, still flat expanse of her lower abdomen. Beneath her palm, utterly imperceptible to the outside world, for microscopic lives were rapidly developing. For precious fragments of the future she had painstakingly begged for, now materializing at the precise moment she had been cast aside by her husband for her supposed failure to provide them. The brutal, savage irony of the situation felt like a physical weight settling in her chest. Later that night, resting alone in the quiet hospital room where she was kept for precautionary observation, Lennox reached a decision that felt heavier, more profound than any she had ever made. She would not inform Merrick of the pregnancy. This wasn't a tactical maneuver born of revenge, though the tempting possibility of that glorious announcement sometimes flickered in her mind. It wasn't driven by petty spite, which she had earned every right to feel. It was rooted in a fierce, instinctive need for protection. Protection for herself, and more importantly, for the fragile lives growing within her. When Dorothy arrived the next morning, having sped through the dark hours from Baltimore following Lennox's cryptic, carefully managed phone call, she found her daughter sitting up in the crisp white sheets. Lennox's hands were cupped over her belly, her features relaxed into a look of absolute, breathtaking serenity, a composure Dorothy hadn't witnessed in years. For babies, Lennox stated simply, bypassing any greeting. "Can you believe it, Mama?" For Dorothy slowly lowered herself into the visitor's chair, pressing a trembling hand to her chest, trying to regulate her breathing. "Baby girl, that is not just a miracle. That is a genuine, divine intervention. He left me because he was convinced I couldn't give him children," Lennox said, her voice completely steady, stripped of all vulnerability. "He chose another woman because he believed I was the biological impediment. These babies, my babies, deserve a father who actively desires them for who they are, not simply as convenient solutions to his aristocratic family legacy or some biological checklist." Lennox met her mother's gaze, her eyes clear and uncompromising. "If he finds out later, I will deal with the fallout then. But right now, my singular, most vital job is bringing these 4 children safely into the world. Everything else, including Merrick Thornwell, is secondary. Everything else can wait." Dorothy studied her daughter's face and recognized the unshakable resolve. It was the same quiet, fierce strength that had defined Dorothy's own life as a young single mother years before. "These children are going to be so loved," Dorothy murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "So incredibly, limitlessly loved." Unsurprisingly, the quadruplet pregnancy was immediately classified as severely high risk. Carrying multiples exponentially increased the potential complications. The threats of premature labor, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and the unnerving possibility that one or more of the infants might suffer restricted or improper development. Dr. Chun immediately referred Lennox to a top maternal-fetal medicine specialist, Dr. Martinez, who meticulously outlined a stringent monitoring plan for both the mother and the 4 growing fetuses. "We need significant lifestyle modification," Dr. Martinez stated during their initial, highly intensive consultation. "No stress, absolutely minimal travel, and a drastically reduced work schedule. Be prepared. By your 5th month, it is highly likely we will place you on mandatory, strict bed rest." Lennox's mind immediately flew to her thriving consulting business, the major clients who relied on her strategic counsel, and the hard-won financial independence that had become her anchor. "I can transition to working remotely," she insisted, attempting to project confidence. "I assure you, I can manage my stress levels." Dr. Martinez gave her a look of unwavering medical authority. "Miss Hargrove, you are housing for human lives. Your physiological system is going to be subjected to a level of strain that you cannot possibly imagine right now. Your singular, non-negotiable job for the next 6 months is the cultivation of healthy children. Every other concern, your career, your deadlines, your professional identity, is now secondary." By the start of her 5th month, Dr. Martinez's predictions materialized precisely as forecast. Lennox's body, previously a strong and reliable machine, rapidly began to falter under the overwhelming weight and demands of 4 rapidly growing occupants. Her blood pressure spiked alarmingly. Her ankles swelled to grotesque, twice-normal proportions. The simple, necessary act of walking the short distance from her bedroom to the kitchen left her gasping, lightheaded, and profoundly exhausted. Dorothy, without hesitation, moved in permanently. She efficiently converted the stylish guest room into a dedicated space for herself, and took complete control of every single household responsibility, from groceries to cleaning. Meanwhile, Yolanda, Lennox's steadfast best friend since their college days, stepped in as the operational manager for the consulting business. She handled daily client calls, coordinated projects, and managed logistics, while Lennox grudgingly directed strategy and decisions from her enforced horizontal position. "I feel utterly useless," Lennox complained one humid afternoon, propped up awkwardly on a mountain of pillows, her laptop precariously balanced on her immense, taut belly. Yolanda, meticulously reviewing a stack of client files at the foot of the bed, looked up with dry amusement. "You are currently fabricating 4 entire human beings simultaneously, Len. That is the categorical opposite of useless. That, my friend, is functionally superhuman." 300 miles away in their pristine Connecticut estate, Merrick and Tinsley were rapidly discovering that establishing a family was a far less simple proposition than they had arrogantly assumed. Their expensive honeymoon in the French Riviera had included a dramatic, performative flourish from Tinsley, who had loudly disposed of her birth control. "No more barriers," she had declared, tossing the compact into a wastebasket with excessive, almost theatrical enthusiasm. "Let's make a baby." But month followed relentless month, and every pregnancy test yielded the same desolate, solitary line that had once been the source of so much pain and haunting despair for Lennox. "Perhaps we're trying too intensely," Merrick suggested lamely after the 6th consecutive negative result, the words feeling utterly hollow and unconvincing even to his own ears. "I don't understand this," Tinsley bit out, her voice taut with corrosive frustration and disbelief. "I am young. I am perfectly healthy. This process should be effortless." By their 8th month of marriage, Tinsley's thin veneer of patience was dissolving into genuine acrimony. "Maybe we should consult a fertility specialist," Merrick proposed tentatively, though the suggestion triggered a familiar, suffocating dread deep within him. "I don't need a specialist," Tinsley snapped back, her eyes flashing accusation. "I am functionally perfect. Maybe the problem isn't me, Merrick." For the first time since the final, bitter papers of his divorce were signed, a chill of doubt seeped into Merrick's confidence. He found himself revisiting the memory of Lennox, the years they had spent enduring invasive tests, the assurances from multiple physicians that nothing was medically amiss with either of them, and the dreadful, sinking possibility that the biological problem had never resided with her at all. He forcefully shoved these treacherous thoughts aside. His old life was emphatically over. His future was defined by Tinsley, and they would resolve this biological failure. They simply had to. On a wet, persistently rainy March morning, 6 months to the day after receiving her world-altering diagnosis, Lennox Hargrove gave birth to 4 perfect, noisy babies. The planned cesarean section was carefully scheduled for 36 weeks, earlier than full term, certainly, but late enough for the quaternary team of doctors to ensure the babies possessed strong, fully developed lungs and stable physiological systems. Dorothy stood shoulder to shoulder with Lennox by the operating table, her hand locked firmly in her daughter's, as Dr. Martinez worked with impressive, focused efficiency. "First baby is a boy," the doctor announced triumphantly, hoisting a small, vigorously squirming pink infant into the bright lights. The baby immediately let loose a sound of powerful, healthy protest. "Strong lungs. This is Micah." Lennox had selected the names months ago, lovingly detailing them in a private journal she kept hidden under her bed. "Second baby, another boy," Dr. Martinez continued briskly. "Malcolm. Third baby is a girl, Zaylee. And our 4th baby is also a girl, Quinley." In less than 20 minutes, Lennox's world had completely inverted. She had transitioned from a woman alone, grappling with a complex past, to the mother of 4 demanding children. "They are perfection," Dorothy wept openly, watching as the neonatal nurses quickly evaluated each baby before whisking them to specialized warming beds. "They are absolutely flawless." Micah, the firstborn, inherited his father's distinctive sandy brown hair, but possessed his mother's deep, warm brown eyes. Malcolm displayed Lennox's slightly darker complexion, counterbalanced by Merrick's sharp, defined facial features. Zaylee was her mother's miniature clone, from her skin tone to the precise curve of her nose. Quinley surprised everyone. With fair skin and a riot of curly dark hair, she seemed to possess a unique aesthetic all her own. When the nurses finally placed the infants on Lennox's chest for essential skin-to-skin contact, she felt a profound chemical shift occur within her. Something foundational and utterly irreversible. All the grinding pain of her marriage, the crushing humiliation of the divorce, the paralyzing uncertainty about her future. All of it dissolved into a single, overwhelming emotional state. Pure, fierce, unconditional love. "Hello, my miracles," she whispered, warm tears blurring her vision as four tiny, new fists instinctively grasped her fingers. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you my entire life." Dorothy, through her own tears, managed to capture the moment with her phone. The image showed Lennox surrounded by her children, her face radiant with a joy that transcended her evident exhaustion. It was a photograph Dorothy instantly knew she would treasure forever. It was also the photograph that, eventually, would change everything. The reality of bringing home four entirely dependent newborns fundamentally restructured every aspect of Lennox's existence. Her luxurious Manhattan apartment, the elegant, high-ceilinged space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view overlooking Central Park, suddenly felt impossibly tiny, echoing, and profoundly unsuitable. The urban noise bounced off the pristine hardwood floors. The internal stairs to the second level became a terrifying safety hazard, impossible to navigate while juggling multiple infants and necessities. Even the perpetually busy streets below, which had once felt energizing, now seemed threatening and overwhelmingly chaotic. 2 months into this new, exhausting reality, Lennox made a radical decision that startled everyone, including her own mother. She sold the apartment. "Are you certain about this, baby girl?" Dorothy asked, watching Lennox meticulously pack while the quadruplets slept soundly in their carriers. "That residence represents the pinnacle of your professional independence." "No, Mama," Lennox countered gently, carefully swaddling a framed photograph of her college graduation. "My true independence is sitting right there in those 4 carriers. This apartment represents the person I used to be. It's past time to construct something new, something real." She purchased a sturdy, 4-bedroom brownstone in a quiet area of Brooklyn, conveniently 15 minutes from Dorothy's home and a mere 10 minutes from Yolanda's family. It was a neighborhood filled with young, bustling families, canopying tree-lined streets, and the comfortable atmosphere where neighbors still congregated on their stoops in the evenings and knew each other by name. The house required substantial work. The kitchen was woefully outdated. The bathrooms screamed for renovation, and the backyard was little more than compacted dirt and weeds. But it possessed the singular quality the Manhattan apartment lacked. Room. Room to breathe, room to expand, room to grow. The brownstone layout was rapidly optimized for maximum efficiency. The largest bedroom was transformed into a spacious, light-filled nursery, featuring 4 cribs positioned strategically so Lennox could visually monitor all of them from any vantage point. The second bedroom became her dedicated home office, fully equipped with the specialized technology required to operate her high-level consulting business remotely. The third room was Dorothy's, who had indeed relocated permanently to help anchor the household. The fourth would serve as Lennox's sanctuary, a private space she rarely found time to utilize. She fundamentally restructured her entire business model to align with her demanding new reality. Instead of accepting lucrative projects that mandated constant travel or high-stakes, in-person meetings, she shifted her focus exclusively to strategic consulting and remote advisory work. She hired 2 trustworthy, part-time employees to manage the day-to-day coordination and administrative tasks that inevitably fell into the cracks between feeding sessions and brief naps. Her total income noticeably decreased, but her priorities had decisively shifted. She realized that professional attainment was meaningless if it cost her precious time with her children. The unvarnished reality of quadruplet motherhood dwarfed any previous expectation Lennox might have held. The nights were a relentless psychological and physical gauntlet. At 2 months old, the infants had zero comprehension of a synchronized sleep schedule. When one woke, hungry and vocal, the wailing would invariably rouse a second, whose distress would awaken the third, which would inevitably set off the fourth. A planned 30-minute feeding session routinely metastasized into a 2-hour marathon involving sequential battles of bottles, burping, rapid diaper changes, and desperate, repeated attempts to coax four alert infants back to sleep. On particularly brutal nights, Lennox would find herself stranded on the nursery floor at 4 in the morning, a baby nestled securely in each arm, two more bouncing mechanically in their seats, tears of sheer, profound exhaustion silently wetting her cheeks. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed to Dorothy during one such harrowing shift. "How does anyone manage even one baby? How am I supposed to possibly manage for one moment at a time?" Dorothy replied calmly, expertly swooping up Micah and Malcolm while Lennox concentrated on Zaylee and Quinley. "You don't have to achieve perfection, baby. You just have to commit to being present." The sheer logistics were paralyzing. For babies translated to washing and sterilizing approximately 32 bottles every single day. It meant cycling through roughly 60 diapers within a 24-hour period. It meant an avalanche of laundry that never, ever reached an end, and a grocery budget that seemed financially unsustainable. Lennox began developing intricate systems born purely of necessity. She implemented color-coded bottle nipples to track who had eaten what volume and when. A massive, detailed chart adhered to the refrigerator meticulously documented sleep durations, feeding amounts, and bowel movements. She established an elaborate rotation schedule for tummy time, bath time, and mandatory individual attention. She learned to function sharply and efficiently on barely 3 hours of fractured sleep. She mastered the advanced technique of feeding 2 infants simultaneously while bouncing the other 2 in mechanized swings. She became the ultimate multitasker, expertly changing a diaper with one hand while steadying a bottle with the other. There were moments, stark and terrifying, when the weight of the responsibility felt utterly crushing. Moments when she genuinely questioned if she had made a catastrophic mistake attempting to raise 4 children in isolation. Moments when she sat alone in her car in the grocery store parking lot and simply wept from the bone-deep fatigue. But interwoven with the exhaustion were transcendent moments of grace. The first time all 4 infants smiled at her simultaneously, Lennox finally comprehended the concept of a heart physically bursting with unrestrained joy. It happened on a bright Tuesday morning when the babies reached 3 months old. She had, against astronomical odds, managed to get every one of them fed, changed, and fully alert at the exact same moment. A minor logistical miracle in itself. She was sitting on the rug in the nursery, making exaggeratedly silly faces and singing wildly off-key lullabies when suddenly, her little faces lit up with perfectly synchronized, identical, gummy grins. "Did you see that?" she shouted delightedly to Dorothy, who was folding an endless stack of tiny clothes nearby. "They all smiled at the exact same time. They know they have the best mama in the entire world," Dorothy replied, watching the sheer, transformative wonder on her daughter's face. The sheer volume of love was an emotional reality no one had prepared her for. She had expected to feel parental affection, naturally, but she hadn't anticipated the exponential multiplication of that love, expanding until it saturated every corner of her life, filling the voids left by her failed marriage. Micah was the confident pacesetter, the first to manage independent head control, the first to roll over, the first to sit without needing support. Even as a tiny infant, he seemed to possess a natural protectiveness over his siblings, crying reflexively when they cried, settling quickly when they settled. He had inherited the dual legacy of his father's sandy brown hair and his mother's deeply expressive brown eyes, anchored by a personality that effortlessly commanded attention without ever needing to demand it. Malcolm was the reflective, gentle soul. He preferred quiet engagement. Being read to, listening to calming music, or simply observing the slow turn of the mobile above his crib in the afternoon sun. He inherited Lennox's darker complexion and Merrick's angular facial geometry, but his essential temperament was entirely his own. An ancient, quiet wisdom that made him seem like an old soul in a brand new body. Zaylee was pure, kinetic performance from day one. She gurgled and babbled far more vociferously than the others, kicked her plump legs enthusiastically during diaper changes, and seemed to instantly brighten whenever an adult focused their attention on her. She was Lennox's perfect miniature twin, sharing the exact skin tone, the same facial structure, and the same irrepressible, infectious energy. Quinley was the quiet surprise. With her unexpected fair skin and unique mop of curly dark hair, she stood apart visually. Yet her personality was the most distinct of all. She was the meticulous observer, the deep thinker. She would lie quietly in her crib, her wide eyes watching the world with an unnerving intensity that seemed far too wise for such a small person. Each one is fundamentally different, Yolanda noted one afternoon, watching Lennox execute the elaborate rotation system required to feed for hungry babies. It's like they meticulously divided up all the possible human personality traits between them. They are perfect, Lennox confirmed, carefully adjusting Quinley's bottle while simultaneously monitoring Micah's progress. Exhausting, yes, but entirely, absolutely perfect. As the children transitioned from infants into inquisitive toddlers, the inevitable questions concerning their paternal parent began surfacing. The inquiries started innocently enough, simple observations about complete families at the playground, casual comments about friends who had fathers permanently at home, and a straightforward curiosity about why their family structure appeared different. Lennox had mentally rehearsed these difficult conversations for years, but the reality proved far more emotionally complex than she had anticipated. "Where is our daddy?" 3-year-old Zaylee inquired one evening, interrupting the rhythm of their bedtime story. The other 3 children immediately looked up from their books, their focus suddenly sharp, captivated by a question they hadn't yet known to ask. "Your daddy and I ultimately couldn't stay married," Lennox explained, maintaining a gentle but unwaveringly factual tone. "Sometimes grown-ups find that they can't make their marriage partnership work, and that is a sad reality. But that failure has absolutely zero bearing on how incredibly special each of you are." "Does he know about us?" Micah asked, his young face serious and acutely perceptive. Lennox carefully chose her precise words. "Your daddy currently lives quite far away, and he has built a very different life for himself now. But you have me, and you have Grandma Dorothy, and you have Aunt Yolanda, and all of us together love you more limitlessly than anything else in the entire world." She made a conscious effort to never display photographs of Merrick, yet she never outright denied or concealed his existence. When the children asked for physical descriptions, she skillfully redirected the conversation by pointing out the features they carried. Micah's specific hair color, Malcolm's defined nose shape, or the distinctive way Quinley's eyes crinkled when she gave a genuine laugh. She refused to speak ill of him, never once injecting bitterness about their failed union, and never suggested his absence was anything less than unfortunate, external circumstances. Her children, she firmly believed, deserved a better foundation than a mother who poisoned their understanding of half of their genetic heritage. 3 states away, the sleek, new marriage Merrick had been so certain would instantly resolve all his life's problems was rapidly disintegrating. 2 long years of increasingly desperate attempts to conceive had produced nothing but raw frustration and escalating, bitter arguments. Tinsley, whose initial charm had been part of her allure, had morphed into a demanding, profoundly resentful woman. The very person who had promised to effortlessly provide him with the heirs Lennox supposedly couldn't deliver, now spent the majority of her time defensively blaming him for their collective biological failure. "Maybe you should get tested again," she needled for at least the 4th time, her voice cutting and sharp with thinly veiled accusation. "I was rigorously tested during my first marriage," Merrick countered wearily, rubbing his temples. "The results were consistently fine." "Well, clearly something has changed in the intervening years. I'm young. I'm healthy. I've never had any issues," she retorted, neatly sidestepping the possibility of her own fault. Yet, privately, paralyzing doubts had finally begun to creep into Merrick's mind, eroding his former certainty. He found himself revisiting the memory of Lennox more frequently. The painful years they had spent trying, the repeated assurances from specialists that they were both medically sound, and the chilling possibility that the impediment had never been physical but situational. What if the fundamental issue had been the tremendous stress he had unknowingly imposed on her? What if the sheer pressure of trying, combined with the instability of their failing relationship, had created a biological cycle that actively prevented conception? What if abandoning Lennox had been the single, most colossal mistake of his entire life? These agonizing questions tormented him, especially in the lonely silence of the late night when Tinsley slept nearby and their enormous, empty house felt like a silent, echoing monument to his compounded failures. He possessed everything he had rationalized wanting. The trophy wife, the freedom from complexity, the constant, approving praise of his socialite mother for making the correct choice. But despite all of it, he had never felt more profoundly miserable. Lennox, conversely, was unearthing a powerful, resilient version of herself she hadn't known was dormant. The insecure woman who had once defined her identity through her marital status, who had narrowly measured her self-worth solely by her success in catering to Merrick's happiness, was definitively gone. In her place stood someone profoundly stronger, infinitely more confident, and more authentically herself than she had ever been allowed to be. Her streamlined consulting business was thriving robustly. The remote working environment permitted her to maintain essential professional focus while being fully present for every milestone in her children's lives, allowing her to cultivate a client base that valued her strategic expertise above all else. She actively pursued challenging, mission-driven projects and formed professional alliances based on genuine mutual respect rather than antiquated social connections. "Just look at my baby girl," Dorothy observed one evening, marveling as Lennox managed to seamlessly coordinate a critical conference call while simultaneously guiding Micah through a difficult puzzle and directing the play of the other 3 toddlers nearby. "Look at this beautiful life you have constructed." "We built it together, Mama," Lennox replied warmly, though she felt a deep, quiet, earned pride in her own accomplishments. She had fabricated a life overflowing with defined purpose, undeniable joy, and relentless, unconditional love. She had successfully raised 4 extraordinary, well-adjusted children who were confident, inherently kind, and deeply secure in their mother's steadfast devotion. She had established genuine financial independence and professional success entirely on her own terms. She realized with serene certainty, finally complete. Not because she had finally located someone to complete an alleged void, but because she had bravely discovered that she had never been damaged or broken to begin with. Now, beloved listeners, what you are about to witness is the pivotal, earth-shattering moment where the entire trajectory of this story irrevocably changes. If you have somehow failed to subscribe to Mr. Roman's Story Vault, now is the precise moment to remedy that oversight, because this narrative is about to execute a turn you simply will not believe. Smash that subscribe button immediately. Drop a like if you are firmly on Team Lennox and prepare yourselves because I am now going to tell you about the single day Merrick Thornwell discovered the staggering truth. A revelation that would utterly shatter everything he thought he knew about his life, his past, and his supposed destiny. This next installment, family, is going to leave you breathless and speechless. When Lennox's specialized consulting firm secured the massive Morrison Plaza development contract, she genuinely believed it was the professional breakthrough her business had been strategically building towards for 3 hard-fought years. The scope of the project. The scope of the project was monumental, a true legacy development. This wasn't just another contract. It was a mixed-use downtown behemoth slated to entirely reshape 6 core city blocks, featuring high-end retail flagships, soaring luxury apartments, state-of-the-art office towers, and meticulously designed public spaces intended to serve as the definitive blueprint for future urban renewal initiatives. The sheer scale meant the marketing and branding strategy alone demanded a budget that exceeded what Lennox had billed in her first 2 years combined as a fierce independent consultant. "This is it, girl," Yolanda asserted, scanning the dense contract terms over artisanal coffee while their children chased each other riotously through Lennox's sun-drenched backyard. "This project catapults you into the major leagues. No more scrambling for mid-level clients or exhausting yourself trying to prove your capabilities to people who should already be fully aware of your worth." Lennox absorbed the validation, feeling a familiar wave of triumphant excitement. She had forged her firm, brick by brick, client by client, meticulously building a reputation founded on disruptive innovation and immaculate, high-stakes execution. The Morrison Plaza project represented the absolute pinnacle of everything she had relentlessly worked toward. What she failed to grasp, what the development company had conveniently omitted from their initial, glowing communications, was that Thornwell Industries maintained a controlling 40% financial stake in the venture. She unearthed this seismic detail precisely 18 minutes before the scheduled kickoff meeting. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Lennox demanded, pressing her phone tightly against her ear as she sat stationary in her tailored car, parked directly across from the shimmering Manhattan high-rise where the meeting was set. Thornwell Industries. The contact at Morrison Development clarified, sounding faintly surprised. They are the primary financial backers, Miss Hargrove. Didn't we happen to mention that? Merrick Thornwell himself will be sitting in on today's presentation to personally approve the final marketing strategy. The world, impossibly, seemed to decelerate around her. Sound dissolved into a muted underwater hum. Miss Hargrove, are you still there? Yes, she managed, her voice emerging strangely steady. I'm here. I'll be right up. For a brief, agonizing moment, she contemplated retreat. Faking illness, rescheduling, inventing any plausible disaster to avert the inevitable collision that was mere moments away. But Lennox Hargrove had not constructed an empire by retreating from insurmountable odds. She glanced into the rearview mirror. Her natural hair, styled into elegant, precise twists, framed her face flawlessly. Her navy blue suit was impeccably tailored, projecting an aura of costly professionalism designed to command silent deference in any C-suite boardroom. She looked exactly like what she was, a highly successful, indispensable businesswoman. Merrick Thornwell's irrelevant opinion of her had absolutely no bearing on that truth. With her head held high, she walked purposefully into the building, her meticulously organized presentation files tucked into a leather portfolio, a significant gift she had bought for herself after securing her 5th major account. Whatever drama unfolded in the next hour, she would confront it with unbreakable poise and absolute competence. The conference room on the 45th floor boasted true floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows, offering a breathtaking, dizzying view of the Manhattan skyline that only served to underscore the power represented by the table they were gathering around. Lennox arrived 15 minutes early, utilizing the time to meticulously review her notes and guarantee the seamless operation of her multimedia technology. She was deep in a discussion of logistical timelines with the Morrison development team when the solid oak door opened, and Merrick Thornwell strode in. For agonizing, productive years had elapsed since their divorce was finalized. Yet seeing him felt like watching a slightly blurred photograph suddenly snap into crystalline focus. He had certainly aged. There was a notable increase in gray threading through his sandy brown hair, deeper, more pronounced lines etched around his eyes, and a subtle shift in his entire bearing, one that suggested deep-seated weariness rather than the boundless, confident command he had once carried with such effortless entitlement. But it was the raw, immediate way he looked at her that caused every other sound, every other person in the room, to retreat into irrelevant background noise. Lennox. His voice was barely audible, a fractured whisper, as though his mind struggled to reconcile the image of the woman before him with memory. She rose gracefully, extending her hand in a gesture that was strictly, impeccably professional. Mr. Thornwell, she said, her voice polished, steady, and utterly devoid of warmth. I was not made aware that you would be joining us today. He simply stared for a long, heavy moment at the hand she offered. When he finally accepted it, his grip lingered, a beat too long, transmitting a charge of forgotten history. I didn't know you were the consultant on this project. Well, she replied coolly, withdrawing her hand and smoothly reclaiming her seat. Now you do. Shall we begin? The presentation consumed 90 minutes, and Lennox executed it with absolute perfection. She guided the room through her comprehensive marketing strategy, detailing the precise brand positioning, the granular target demographics, the aggressive digital campaigns, the traditional media integration, and the community outreach programs. Her concepts were innovative, her foundational research was exhaustive, and her delivery was confident without ever veering into undue aggression. Yet, throughout the entire 90 minutes, she remained acutely aware of Merrick's fixed gaze. He posed minimal questions and offered almost nothing to the operational discussion, appearing instead to be struggling intensely to focus on the business matters at hand. Instead, she noticed him dissecting her. The way she moved, the precise rhythm of her speech, the quiet, intrinsic confidence she now projected. Something fundamental had shifted within her since their separation, and he was clearly scrambling to comprehend the magnitude of that change. The woman he had abandoned had undoubtedly been successful, but she had always carried an underlying, subtle need for external validation, a quiet seeking of approval that had sometimes colored her professional exchanges. That corrosive need was utterly extinguished now. This new Lennox spoke with an undeniable authority sourced from internal conviction, not external recognition. She neither sought his approval nor deferred to his opinion. She presented her ideas as someone who knew their inherent worth and expected nothing less than mutual recognition. Your strategy for the community outreach component is particularly impressive, one of the Morrison executives remarked, nodding in genuine approval. The partnerships you've proposed with local neighborhood organizations demonstrate a real, nuanced understanding of the community dynamics. Thank you, Lennox responded simply, accepting the praise with a slight inclination of her head. Community buy-in is absolutely essential for any major development project that genuinely seeks to serve the area, rather than merely gentrify it. She observed Merrick's eyebrows subtly raise at her response. The Lennox he remembered might have nervously deflected the compliment or hastily attributed the success to her research team. This Lennox simply accepted the praise as her rightful due. As the meeting wrapped up, hands were formally shaken, business cards efficiently exchanged, and final timeline expectations established. Lennox began packing her materials with the swift, precise movements of a woman who had demonstrably more important places to be. "Miss Hargrove," Merrick said, approaching her as the remaining occupants of the room filed out. "Could I possibly have a word with you?" She glanced up from her portfolio, her expression professionally guarded. "Is there something further regarding the project specifics?" "No, He appeared to struggle for the precise phrasing. "It's good to see you. You look incredible, Lennox." "Thank you," she replied neutrally, without inflection. "If you'll excuse me, I have another appointment scheduled." She was halfway to the door when his voice, edged with urgency, cut through the quiet. "Lennox, wait, please." She turned in the corridor, offering him an expression that was politely attentive but utterly discouraging. "I've thought about you," he admitted, his voice dropping now that they were removed from the developers. "Over these past years, I've often wondered how you were doing." "As you can clearly see," she stated softly, "I'm doing quite well. You are. You truly are." He moved closer, and she distinctly noticed the absence of the wedding band on his left hand. "I need you to know that my marriage, Tinsley and I are getting divorced." Lennox felt a profound, total absence of feeling upon hearing the news. No rush of satisfaction, no burst of vindication, no sense of cosmic justice finally served. Just a quiet, deep-seated emptiness for the years that had been irrevocably wasted. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, managing the statement in the most generalized, polite way possible. "Are you?" His eyes searched hers desperately, pleading for connection. "Lennox, I made a catastrophic mistake. I understand that now. I should never have. Merrick, the past is exactly that. The past. I have moved on completely." "Have you?" The question erupted from him, more urgently and perhaps more wounded than he had intended. "Is there someone else in your life?" Lennox's mind instantly conjured the image of 4 3-year-olds who would be eagerly anticipating her arrival home. For beautiful, vibrant children who were blissfully unaware that their mother was standing in a high-rise hallway facing the man who had once categorically claimed she could never provide him with what he needed. "Yes," she said softly. "There's someone else. Several someones, actually." Before Merrick could respond, her phone began to ring. She glanced down and saw her mother Dorothy's face on the screen. Dorothy was scheduled to pick up the children from preschool, and video calls almost invariably meant the children wanted to immediately display something they had created or achieved. Without hesitation, Lennox accepted the call. "Mommy! Mommy! Look what we made!" For exuberant voices flooded the hallway through the phone speaker. The camera view was shaky. Dorothy was clearly wrestling to keep 4 highly energetic toddlers within the frame, but the resulting image was unmistakable. For children, appearing identically aged around 3, holding up their art projects from school. "Micah," with his unmistakable sandy brown hair and warm, reflective brown eyes, waving a finger painting enthusiastically. Malcolm, possessing his mother's smooth complexion but his father's sharp, intelligent facial structure, shyly displaying a clay sculpture. Zale, who was a carbon copy of Lennox in every way, singing a loud, off-key song she had learned. And finally, Quinley, with her fair skin and tightly curled dark hair, observing the glorious chaos around her with eyes that seemed far too ancient and wise for a child. Merrick's face drained of every drop of color. The phone nearly slipped from Lennox's grasp as she watched him silently process the undeniable evidence before him. The resemblances were not subtle. The sandy hair on Micah, the definitive facial bone structure on Malcolm, the unmistakable, harmonious blend of features that could only originate from two specific individuals. Those children. His voice broke, dissolving into a ragged whisper. Lennox, those children are... She smoothly ended the call and deliberately slipped the phone back into her purse. Her movements were calm and measured, a sharp contrast to the thunderous storm she could see rapidly building in his eyes. You were pregnant. The words emerged as a shattered breath. When we divorced, you were pregnant with my children. Our children, she corrected gently, meeting his gaze. They are definitely our children. But you were so utterly certain that I couldn't give you what you wanted, that you never once considered the possibility that you might be wrong, that you might have been destroying everything for a lie. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung heavy in the high air between them, laden with the weight of years of pain, confusion, and catastrophic missed opportunities. Because you made it perfectly clear what you believed about me, Merrick. You chose another woman because you were convinced I was the problem. You blamed me for an issue that was affecting both of us equally. You discarded me and our entire marriage because you believed I was barren. Her voice remained low and steady, but each word was precise, deliberate, and final. I decided my children deserved better than a father who would only want them because of what they represented to the Thornwell family legacy. They're my children too, he pleaded, desperation now openly audible in his voice. Yes, biologically they are. Lennox held the line. But parenthood, Merrick, isn't just a biological fact. It's about showing up. It's about being present through the sleepless nights, the endless mountain of diapers, the first tentative steps, and the skinned knees. It's about making the deliberate choice to be there every single day, even when it is overwhelmingly difficult. She paused, letting him absorb her point. Where were you when I was battling nausea and throwing up every morning for 4 solid months? Where were you when I was confined to mandatory bed rest because caring for babies was putting both my life and theirs at critical risk? Where were you the day I went into labor, or during the emergency cesarean section, or throughout those newborn days when I was functioning on maybe 2 hours of sleep? I didn't tell you because you were busy celebrating your engagement to the woman who could supposedly give you everything I couldn't. You were so firmly convinced that I was the sole problem that you refused to entertain any other possibility. Merrick stood utterly paralyzed, finally confronting the horrifying magnitude of what he had lost and what he had willfully missed. For the first time in his privileged life, he had absolutely no counter-argument. For children, he whispered, bewildered. Quadruplets. Micah, Malcolm, Zale, and Quinley, Lennox confirmed, softening slightly as she spoke their names. They are extraordinary. They are brilliant and kind and funny and perfect, and they have been raised with nothing but dedicated love every single day of their lives. I need to meet them. That is no longer your sole decision to make. You abdicated that right. They're my children. They're my legacy. They are my children, Lennox reiterated, her voice firm, the anger contained but palpable. They have been my children for every single moment that truly mattered. You chose to walk away from the possibility of them. You chose to believe I was inadequate. You chose another woman over the wife who would have given you everything. She collected her portfolio and straightened the cuff of her jacket with a final, decisive motion. I have to go, she stated simply. My children are waiting for me. As she turned toward the elevators, Merrick called out, desperation thick in the air. Lennox, please. We need to talk about this. I have rights. She turned one final time, her expression utterly composed. You have the rights you chose to exercise, she said quietly. Nothing more, Merrick. The elevator doors sealed shut between them, and Lennox descended 45 floors in a profound silence, her heart pounding against her ribs, but her resolve absolutely impenetrable. She had protected her children from the very moment of their conception, and she would continue to protect them now. Whatever legal storm was coming, it would proceed strictly on her terms. The anticipated legal tempest arrived less than a week later. Merrick immediately retained a formidable team of Manhattan attorneys specializing in high-net-worth paternity cases. Men in suits so expensive they seemed to hum with silent power, speaking in carefully measured tones about biological rights, parental responsibilities, and the theoretical best interests of children they had never even bothered to meet. DNA testing promptly confirmed what all parties already understood. Micah, Malcolm, Zale, and Quinley were, without a doubt, his biological progeny. Armed with this incontrovertible evidence, his legal counsel dispatched threatening, formal letters demanding immediate, unrestricted access, comprehensive custody arrangements, and retroactive child support calculations that dwarfed previous figures. Even Helena Thornwell, who had once summarily dismissed Lennox as wholly unsuitable for the family name, suddenly discovered a passionate, vociferous interest in her newfound grandchildren. She called Lennox relentlessly, demanding meetings and issuing veiled threats of legal action if she was denied access to the legitimate Thornwell heirs. But Lennox remained absolutely resolute. You can be a part of their lives, she informed Merrick during a grueling, court-mandated mediation session. But it will be strictly on their terms, not yours. They do not know you. They have been loved, nurtured, and raised completely without you for 3 full years. You do not get to shatter their stability simply because it is suddenly convenient for you to appear now. They're my children, too, Merrick argued, though the conviction in his voice was noticeably weaker than it had been in the hallway. Parenthood isn't just about biology, Lennox repeated, her gaze unwavering. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's desperately difficult. Where were you for the morning sickness that lasted 18 hours a day? Where were you for the forced bed rest, the emergency C-section, the endless sleepless nights with 4 newborns? Where were you when Micah took his first proud steps? Or when Malcolm spoke his first complicated word? Or when Zale learned to sing an entire nursery rhyme? Or when Quinley started reading complex books at 2 years old? Merrick had no possible answer. He could only stare at the table, his silence deafening. The presiding judge, a distinguished woman in her 60s who had overseen thousands of painful custody battles, studied the dense documentation before her with the careful, measured attention of someone who understood that 4 young lives hung precariously in the balance. Mr. Thornwell, she finally stated, her voice crisp and final, you undeniably possess biological rights to these children. However, Miss Hargrove has been their sole, effective parent for the entirety of their lives. This court will not disrupt the stable, well-adjusted lives of 4 children merely to satisfy your newfound interest in fatherhood. She granted Merrick precisely 2 hours of supervised visitation every Saturday, with a court-appointed monitor present. Before any consideration could be given to unsupervised visits, he was ordered to complete a full curriculum of parenting classes, attend rigorous therapy sessions focusing on accountability, and definitively demonstrate a consistent, measurable commitment to the children's sustained well-being. For the first time in his exceptionally privileged life, Merrick Thornwell was compelled to earn something that money could not simply purchase. The profound transformation that followed astonished everyone, including Merrick himself. He attended every single parenting class, even the ones that felt deeply humiliating for a 40-year-old corporate titan, sitting among anxious teenage parents and young, struggling couples. He appeared for every therapy session, where a soft-spoken counselor systematically forced him to confront the catastrophic choices he had made and the irreparable emotional damage he had caused. Most crucially, he never, ever missed a scheduled visitation. At first, the children were reserved, uncertain of this large, unfamiliar man who claimed to be their father. They clung instinctively to the monitor, a kind, patient woman named Mrs. Patterson, who specialized in helping fractured families navigate difficult reunions. Merrick learned how to sit comfortably on the floor. He mastered the architecture of building blocks and the art of coloring inside the lines. He discovered the proper, theatrical way to read picture books, complete with distinct character voices. He discovered that Micah was an innate, tiny leader who organized his siblings, that Malcolm preferred quiet, focused activities and gentle conversations, that Zale thrived on performing and demanded an enthusiastic audience, and that Quinley observed everything with those profound, wise eyes. He absorbed their favorite meals, their specific bedtime rituals, their small fears, their grand hopes, and the fierce, protective loyalty they held for one another. Above all, he watched Lennox. He watched how she managed utter chaos with an effortless, calm grace. How she implemented discipline guided by love rather than anger. How she had constructed a life brimming with genuine joy from the desolate ashes of their dissolved marriage. He saw the woman he had discarded for being supposedly inadequate, and finally realized she had always been spectacularly extraordinary. "I was a complete fool," he confessed to her one quiet evening after a supervised visit, as they stood on the front porch of her brownstone while the children played under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye in the backyard. "Yes," Lennox agreed simply, without judgment. "You were. How do you not hate me?" he asked, the question deeply genuine. She considered the response carefully. "I did for a while, but hatred consumes energy that I would much rather devote to my children. And truthfully, Merrick, if you hadn't left, I might never have discovered my own true strength. I might have spent my entire life frantically trying to be enough for you instead of finally realizing I was always more than enough for myself." "You were always extraordinary," he repeated softly. "I was just too privileged and too blind to truly see it." 3 transformative years elapsed. Merrick diligently earned the right to unsupervised visitation, then regular overnight stays, and eventually, he secured consistent weekend custody. He never missed a school recital, a chaotic soccer game, or a single parent-teacher conference. He painstakingly learned how to braid Zale's increasingly long hair, to patiently help Malcolm with his complex reading assignments, to engineer elaborate Lego cities with Micah, and to engage Quinley in the thoughtful, philosophical conversations she increasingly craved. He never remarried, never pursued serious dating, and entirely abandoned the superficial, status-driven social life that had once seemed essential. His world now centered entirely around Saturday morning pancake sessions with his children and quiet, increasingly profound conversations with their mother. The genuine, fundamental affection that had once existed between him and Lennox began to tentatively resurface, slowly and with immense caution. It started with eyes lingering too long during custody exchanges, then conversations that organically stretched far longer than strictly necessary, and finally, it manifested in shared family dinners where easy laughter finally replaced the lingering tension of their fractured past. On the children's 6th birthday, a vibrant, chaotic celebration held in Lennox's backyard, attended by their full circle of friends and family. Merrick stayed behind to assist with the immense post-party cleanup. They worked side by side in the kitchen, washing and drying dishes, while 4 utterly exhausted children slept deeply upstairs, their bellies full of cake and their rooms overflowing with new treasures. "Lennox," he began, drying a stack of plates she had just washed. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know that I am the one who systematically destroyed what we had. But I have spent these last years trying, with every fiber of my being, to finally become the man you always believed I could be." She set down the damp dishcloth and turned to fully face him, her expression soft but firm. "What exactly are you saying, Merrick?" "I'm saying I never, not once, stopped loving you. Even in my absolute worst, most selfish moments, even as I was destroying us, you were the only person who ever truly saw me. Tinsley saw my bank account. My mother seized the family name and the empire. But you, Lennox, you saw me, and I threw that irreplaceable gift away." "We can't rewind the clock and go back," Lennox said, her voice gentle but containing an immutable certainty. "I know that," he agreed instantly. "I am not asking to go back. I am asking if we can move forward, slowly, carefully, responsibly. Whatever you need, Lennox." Lennox thought of her mother's timeless wisdom, of her own difficult, transformative journey, and of the powerful, self-assured woman she had finally become. She was no longer the young girl who desperately needed validation from Merrick Thornwell. She was entirely whole on her own merits. But perhaps, she realized with a quiet clarity, being complete didn't necessarily mean she had to be alone. Slowly, she finally conceded. "We take it slowly, Merrick. And if you ever break my trust again, there is no coming back." "I won't," he promised, and this time, she saw the undeniable, settled truth reflected deep in his eyes. And so, some blessings arrive in the most unexpected, chaotic packages. For tiny miracles proved, once and for all, that the universe operates on its own inscrutable timing, its own grand designs, and its own capacity for beautiful, astonishing surprises. As Lennox still often told her children at bedtime, "Never, my darlings, let anyone tell you what you can or cannot become. The world will always try to put you into small, manageable boxes, but you, my tiny perfect stars, were born to fly." And fly they absolutely did. If you made it all the way to the conclusion of this story, you are now officially part of the Mr. Roman Story Vault family. Now, this specific narrative struck me differently because it beautifully illustrates that sometimes the greatest, most profound victories are meticulously disguised as crushing defeats. That occasionally, losing everything is the only definitive way to discover the true, fierce substance of what we are truly made of. Do me a crucial favor. If this story resonated deeply with you, if it altered something fundamental in your heart, please share it immediately with someone who desperately needs to hear its message. Share it with someone who has been told repeatedly that they are not enough. Share it with someone who is courageously undertaking the painful process of rebuilding their life from scratch. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts on Lennox's final choice. Was she ultimately right to extend Merrick a second chance after all he put her through? What would you have decided? And if you haven't yet subscribed, seriously, what on earth are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Trust me, you absolutely do not want to miss the incredible stories that are already queued up and coming next. Until next time, always remember this powerful truth. Your story is never truly over. Sometimes it's just dramatically beginning. This is Mr. Roman, and I'll see you in the next Story Vault.